Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world right now. It's 5 o'clock New York time on Friday afternoon. That means it's time for the Happy Hour Live webcast from whiskycast.com. Good afternoon to you. I'm Mark Gillespie, back in the WhiskyCast studio and back at our normal time. Before we get started, and this is going to be an Ask Mark Anything show. None of the people that we were able to try to get for guests this week were able to join us. So this is going to be another one of those Ask Mark Anythings where I'm going to take your questions and we're going to have some fun. But before we do, I want to address last week's show. We started at noon New York time, 5 hours earlier than usual because of being in London for the whiskey show. We had innumerable technical problems, and somebody actually commented on YouTube that the thing was basically unwatchable. And personally, I agree with you on that one. I couldn't even watch the replay myself, but we did have a lot of fun. If we do another live show from a festival, which I'm sure we will at some point, we're going to try to find a better way to make it happen, where we're not relaxed, where we're not related or linked up to a Wi-Fi network, where we can actually get a decent signal and decent audio, and where we can do things the way we do them here in the studio. So I'm ready to take your questions, your whiskey comments. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Dave Kuhn starts off with well, and off to find a clean glass. David Owen, hello everyone, keeping well. Pete Head says, good evening everyone. While we're waiting for questions to come in, I will show off a couple of trophies from the other day. The first one, the one I'm almost as proud of as this, the IWSC Spirits Communicator Trophy. This came from Tyrone Cote, our pal from Halifax, Nova Scotia. It is the official arse hockey puck for the Association of Halifax Regional Scotch Enthusiasts, with a Latin phrase, Quator Fella Inventum, which I'm not sure what it means, but if Tyrone's watching, he will hopefully be able to explain it to us. But this is going to have a place of pride in my cabinet, right alongside the Spirits Communicator Trophy. But thank you, Tyrone, for that. Pete Head says he didn't know if last week's was watchable because he didn't watch it. Busy doing whiskey-related things on Isla. I get that. I know Matt was watching. Good evening, Matt. And let's start with your whiskey questions. This is going to be, the length of the show is going to be dictated by your questions. The more questions we get, the more comments we get, the longer we're going to go tonight. I will tell you that this will not be the case next week. Ashok Chokhalingam of Amrut will be joining us, the premier Indian single malt whiskey maker, and arguably the first Indian single malt whiskey maker as well, will be joining us on next week's show. So let's see. Mitch Gurwitz, greetings from the fortunately wet town of Piscataway, New Jersey, on the banks of the mighty Piscataway River, home of Rutgers University, where my daughter went for 4 years. For the record, I am drinking a Redbreast 12-year-old Cask-Strength, killing off the remaining little bit that's left in the bottle, and fortunately the cork didn't break. Love the notes on this one. A lot of butterscotch, lots of caramel. Let's see. We have a question now from Pete Head. What's on your wish list for the upcoming year regarding guests and subjects, etc.? I really want to get to Japan. I really want to visit the Japanese distilleries. That's the one place I've not been able to go to that I want to go to. My dream is to basically have a new guest every week for the webcast. I'll be happy with that. Trying to schedule these things. For instance, if we schedule it with a guest from Scotland, it's 10 o'clock there in the evening. They've got family commitments, and on a Friday night, it's hard to get people to show up. Other folks on the U.S. East Coast, it's 5 o'clock. It's quitting time for them. It's 2 o'clock on the Pacific Coast. So we do occasionally have a hard time finding guests. Dave Kuhn wants to know if Pete Head is at the Lagavulin Jazz Festival this weekend on Isla. We got word there are actually 2 festival bottlings, including one from Lagavulin that will be available for sale off the island, online through malts.com, as well as the usual festival bottling that's only available at the distillery during the festival. Got the chance to meet Tabitha Spirit Bomb last Sunday in London. It was great to meet you. And she says, hi, all. It was great to finally connect with a few of you listeners and a few of you viewers that are out there. By the way, those of you who are watching are dedicated WhiskyCast listeners and viewers. And I have an invitation for you. We have a project going on that I don't want to say a whole lot more about, but if you're interested in helping us beta test it, send your email address to comments@whiskycast.com and we will get back to you. You've got to be available for a Zoom call on Sunday evening, East Coast time, because we want to explain what we're doing and give you a chance to and walk you through it. But we're working on a special project here that we've shown to a few folks who seem to like it so far. And we want to expand the test base out to a wider group. So send your email address to comments@whiskycast.com, and we will have a little bit of fun on Sunday night with a Zoom call. Let's see, comments now. Dave Kuhn asked if Petehead was at the Jazz Fest. Petehead responded, nope, just visiting. Was the only week feasible? If the Jazz Fest was on, I'd been lucky, but apparently not. Tabitha says, I got the feeling I caught you at the wrong time, though. No, you didn't catch me at the wrong time. I was scrambling around trying to get interviews and trying to do anything. So I would have been stressed at just about any time you'd caught me through the weekend. Christopher Malloy says, if it's an OnlyFans site, I'm out. No, it is not an OnlyFans site. It's the exact opposite of an OnlyFans site. Bill Ricker, regarding last week, it was good for the conditions. Not up to the normal professional standards. The festival you did with your own internet on the river deck worked better. Yeah, it did. That's also because I hauled camera, lights, a video switcher, and a van load of equipment over to the venue for that. And I couldn't do that into a carry-on bag to take to London. So that's why we were running with a setup that was Mickey Mouse at best. Greg wants to know, what will be the EU hour? Do you know, Mark, at least London time? The boss is setting that time. Send us the email. We'll get back to you. I'm thinking it probably is going to be late Sunday night EU time. I'm thinking probably 7 o'clock or so US time, but we'll see what happens. Let's see. Bill Ricker says, seems like you're capable of self-producing in your own studio and for field reporting, but might need an on-site producer assistant for live casts from festivals. Yeah, we had one of those when we did the American Whiskey Conference, or convention rather, back last September, a year ago. Yep, we had one of those. And yeah, I could have used one of those, but I didn't have one. So we were basically just running around like a chicken with our head cut off. Alan Winchester, some great colleagues in Japan, would love to hear their discussion with WhiskyCast. So would I. And Alan, if you want to join us, I will be glad to email you if you want to jump in here. If you're not busy, I will send you an email to see if you're up for it. We'll see if Alan wants to jump in and join on. David Owen says, apart from Redbreast, what are your other favorite Irish whiskeys? I have a soft spot for Irish whiskeys. Writer's Tears, The Irishman. I love a good Bushmills from time to time. The Dublin Liberties Distilleries folks have some good stuff. Pierce Irish Whiskey. Slane. There are a whole bunch out there that I like. As a matter of fact, in a couple of weeks, I'll be heading over to Ireland to visit some of the distilleries I haven't been to yet, including Bushmills. We're still trying to figure out if we can do the webcasts during that trip because of the time difference and because, like London, I'll be traveling solo and hauling my own gear over. So it may be difficult to do them. We're going to make a decision on that very soon here. Alan looks like he's going to jump in and join us here in just a minute. So let's do a question from Mitch Gurwitz. What makes some whiskeys available only in different states and at vastly different prices from state to state? Is there a master list that tells which spirits are available in each state? It would be useful to know that I should stop trying to find bottles in New Jersey, and if it's worth going for a drive, as other states may have what New Jersey doesn't. No, there's no list like that. Unfortunately, I wish there was. It would make life a lot easier. Basically, you're on your own there. Your best bet is to see if a store has a website, and to be able to check and see what they have in inventory. Your best bet is just to get a phone number and call ahead and see what they do have. There's no list like that. I couldn't even begin to consider compiling a list like that. Let's see. Interesting question from Dave Kuhn. Imagine you pass away and everyone throws a tribute concert in your honor. What 5 bands or artists, living or dead, would play the concert? Ooh, never thought of this question before. I would say would start with Jimmy Buffett. As the boss said from upstairs, because I'm that guy. Yeah, I get crap all the time, guys. It's part of life. Buffett. Since I'm dead, it really doesn't matter. But I would love to have, if it's living or dead, let's have the Beatles. Let's have the Rolling Stones. Maybe a few bands with their own whiskeys, just to be able to have some fun. I've always said that when I die, I want either to have a great big wake with all the whiskey behind me and here in the studio, or a Viking funeral. So something loud, something Scandinavian, maybe Motorhead, something like that. As Bill Ricker points out, pretty much everything is available in New Jersey. Not quite, but pretty close. Let's see. I'd love to hear some suggestions on that from you guys. What would you have if someone were to throw a tribute concert in your honor? What bands would you love to hear? Oh, and of course, a bagpiper, as Bill Ricker points out. You got to have a bagpiper. As they're doing the Viking funeral thing and pushing me off into the Cooper River, which would probably catch on fire by itself without the flaming arrows. But that would be fun to have as well. I think definitely would be a bagpipe band. Maybe Frank Scott's bagpipe band come down from Fredericton, New Brunswick, and join us. That would be kind of fun. Once again, if you're joining us late, this is the Ask Mark Anything version of the show, where we're going to take your questions. Oh yeah, great idea from Dave Kuhn. Robin Lang. Well, that would be a good one. We've had Robin on the webcast before. Christopher Malloy says the Stones, Zeppelin, the Ghost of Jimi Hendrix. Yep. Ricker says he'll ask his cousin to have the piper from her wedding do his burial. It's only one hill over. I'm not sure if that's one hill over from the wedding site or one hill over from the cemetery, but Greg Serafian says, bring David Brody from Bunnahabhain. He'll sing some great songs as he did in a live show on my channel and as he does in his channel. I don't sing, guys. I'm not going to sing. It's not going to happen. Don't even start. I can do many things well, but singing is not one of them. Okay. Oh, yeah. Definitely, Tabitha. Duran Duran, Orbital, Girls Aloud, and the Ghost of Prince. Oh, yeah. Prince, got to have Prince. Greg Serafian, Robin Lang, and drinking Edward Hour, 12-year-old Caledonia at the same time, can't beat it. Ooh, that does sound like a lot of fun. Although with Robin Lang, you got to be drinking Brooke Laddie because he sings so much about Brooke Laddie. Christopher Malloy, Mark, were you able to look into the OSWAs? I did take a brief look into them. I was traveling most of the last few days, so I haven't had a chance to look much into them. My concern with online awards is that unless you know that there's no way to rig the judging and rig the voting, it's damn near impossible to tell how things are going with how credible the results are on the judging. And fortunately, Alan Winchester is joining us. Alan, how are you? Alan, you're muted. If you can unmute, let's unmute you. Nope, you're muted still.
Hi, Mark. Congratulations on the Communicator Award. Very well deserved.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it. How are you tonight?
I'm very good, but you must be really tired. You've been back and forth over the Atlantic there, and last week you were collecting your award. You were at the Whisky Festival. I'm just chilling out here in Dufftown.
What's in your glass, Alan?
Well, now that I'm sort of freelance, Frank, I'm drinking a local brew. And it's on offer at Cost Cutters in Dufftown, so I'm supporting the local Cost Cutter.
Yeah, we saw David Stewart at Whiskey Live London, at the Whiskey Show in London. He came out one of the few times he's done a whiskey show in a while.
Oh, it's great to see David out for that and speaking about the Balvenie. I think I saw a lot of great comments on the Red Rose Balvenie. But Balvenie is a superb dram. We in Dufftown know it's a great dram, so it was great to see him. And of course, we've all been in limbo for the last few years with not travelling. I hope to travel quite shortly. Yeah.
Where are you going to go, first of all, besides, I know you're coming to Fredericton, right?
That's my first travel since I last saw you in New Zealand.
And I will see you in Fredericton as well. Tell us about this closed distilleries course that you're going, or masterclass that you're going to teach on Saturday in Fredericton. This is going to be a good one. Davin DeKergamo normally teaches those, but he's not going to be there this year. You're filling in. Tell me about
a shame. Yeah, well, of course, I can speak about closed distilleries till the cows come home sort of thing, but I'll be speaking there. And of course, we'll be tapping into Frank Scott's special drams that he has in his wide collection. And Frank is always so generous with these drams. He asked me to pick one the last time, and I think it came bottom of the collection, but it was a superb Cornwall Moor, which is the distillery next door to Balvenie. So I look forward to speaking about these things and also getting interactions from folk about the tastes, etc. So I'm thoroughly looking forward to it and thoroughly looking forward to traveling again.
Let me throw a question at you that they threw at me here. When you're gone and they throw a tribute concert in your honor, what 5 bands do you want to have play?
I'm going to have Rory Gallagher and Tin Lizzy playing together on the same stage. Now, unfortunately, both of them are dead, but they were fantastic Irish rock musicians of their era. And that was what I was brought up with. From Whiskey in the Jar to Rory Gallagher with the Bullfrog Blues, with his his connections with bluegrass music, etc. So that's the bands for my gig.
Great choices, and they made the question living or dead, so you can have the ghost of any band you want to come back to. So those would work as well.
Phil Lynott and Rory Gallagher, that's them. And I hope Pete and Diesel from the Islands will come and do the support band.
What are you working on these days in your retirement? We talked a couple of weeks ago about the Cabrac Trust and the Cabrac Distillery. How are things going with that?
Yeah, the Cabrac's going great. Mark, as we said in the podcast, in the broadcast a few weeks ago, it's something I got involved with because I feel it's so right. I think it's taken back distilling to a part, believe it or not, a part of Speyside that is quite empty of distilleries, this strange place called the Cabrach. Jonathan quite rightly describes it as an island within Speyside. It's only 8 miles from my house, but yet you're in a different country. It's lots of things have happened there over the years. It was a heartbed of distilling. Funny enough, it was illicit distilling there was as famous as Glenlivet. Cabrach had top billing in Aberdeen at the times, but it's an area that we're hopefully trying to regenerate and take back to its rightful place. There was early legal distilling was important there as well, but eclipsed. There's sort of strange reasons why it's happened, and that's one of the projects. I've also been involved in the Barra project, distilling to Barra, working with Michael Morrison and his really enthusiastic team. So hopefully we'll move that one forward as well. Yeah.
I know that you've been involved in some of the archaeological digs that the National Trust in Scotland has been doing. Tell us about those.
Yes, well, that started as my time with the Glenlivet. It was the pioneering spirit, but fascinating archaeology would come in, and you say, "What would you learn from this?" And of course, the National Trust is probably one of the biggest landowners within Scotland. And they found that they've got lots of illicit distilling sites within their property. I've been very lucky to join them in excavations in the West Coast in Torridon and at Mar Lodge, which is next door neighbour to the New King in Deeside. And we've looked at that. And also what they did in conjunction with Shivers Brothers was they looked at the original distilling site at Glenlivet, Upper Drammin, which was abandoned in 1858, built, all moved down the hill, just a few I'm speaking yards, feet, well, meters. It's only about half a mile down the hill, and they built the present day Glenlivet distillery. But the archaeological dig, we've had 2 sessions at it, has revealed so much about early distilling in Speyside.
How much did they find?
Down to King George III shilling, which identifies it roundabout. This could have been. I think it's amazing. I think that shilling could have dropped out of George Smith's pocket, and it has been buried there for over 164 years. So I think that's amazing. It could go back 200 odd years. Lots of other things. We found some of the early vessels, which we as distillers thought would have been moved down the hill, but that's been fascinating. So we're trying to identify what type of wood it was, because I thought it would be larch, and everybody says, no, larch was only introduced from Europe just a few years before, so it might be some Scots pine, we don't know, but oak, etc. We thought this parts of equipment would have been moved, but here we find the bottom of a wooden vessel. So lots of questions being asked, but that's the fun archaeology. It asks so many questions.
Where do you want to go next with the archaeological digs? What do you want to look at next?
I would love to excavate some of the illicit stills that's all around Scotland, Mark. We'd like to find more evidence. We'd love to find what sort of grains was being used, if there's any left in some of the bodies, which we haven't found yet, but the last Torridon dig found a kiln, so we hope that some of the samples taken from there will reveal a little bit more. But it's amazing. This kiln was up a mountain. We don't think it was near barley growing area. Well, maybe half a mile away, but they were carrying it up here. So that's fascinating, because everybody's fascinated in the grains that were used maybe 200 years ago.
What would those grains have been? Obviously still barley, but not as we know it, right?
Yeah, I would expect, Mark, but this is me just putting my sort of views in it. I think it would be Bear or Big, the original landrace barleys, whether they were 6-road or 2-road, 4-road, and also oats. We would expect to find oats as a malt.
Go ahead.
Oats will grow. We know they still grow oats and Bear together over in the islands. So, and also it's a cereal grows so quickly. The Vikings knew to grow it up. I think they grow it in Iceland, but they definitely grow it in Orkney and Shetland. And it's so far north because it's such a short growing period, but these grains will grow very quickly.
When you look back at the history of whiskey, what do we not know that we'd like to know? Or do we know pretty much everything there is to know about the history of whiskey? What don't we know that we should find out?
That's a good one, because it's yeast that I'm always fascinated in. We know that the early moonshiners, illicit distillers, I also add the moonshiners in the United States, they must have known something about recultivating the yeast back into the process. And we know it in Scotland, all the farming communities brewed beer for the farm servants, workers. So there was a knowledge of that. But I've been fascinated reading a lot of books about Norway, and that connects over to Shetland and Orkney, where the Norwegians still do a lot of home brewing or farm brewing, and they have different ways of dealing with yeast. And I think there's maybe something there that we've maybe lost over the years. I've heard that the illicit distillers took the birch leaves over the fermenting heads and put it up the chimney to cure it, and then used it in the subsequent brews. But there's a lot we don't understand there as well.
We had an interesting question that came in a couple of minutes ago while we were talking from Tabitha. What whiskey would you take to the afterworld? Would it be the Alan Winchester edition, the 50-year-old Glenlivet?
Yeah, I couldn't even afford to take it to the afterward, Mark. I would love to. What would I love to take back to Underwood? Oh, gosh, yeah, would I take that one? Probably. I'd probably take one of the 1959 cellar collections that I was speaking to him at the last Whisky Festival. Jim Cryle did, and his tenure as illicit master distiller at Glenlivet. It was a fantastic dram, and opened it with folk in Paris, and it was such an experience opening some of that old whiskies. So some of them from that eras. I always missed, I think it was Ian Logan opened at Glenlivet with the gentleman at a pre-1900 Glenlivet at Glenlivet. The manager, Trevor Buckley, and Ian tasted it. And I says, what was it like? What was it like? Because I wasn't there. And they says, the nose was quite similar, but then the taste was quite something else. But then you had to remember this whiskey had been in a bottle for a long time. So something like that I haven't tasted yet, I would like to take with me. Yeah.
I think I'd have to take the first bottle I could grab on the way out the door.
Always a good idea. Yeah.
Dave Kuhn, good question here. Was there ever a time when Scotch was a bargain to buy in Scotland? Did growing bottling variants of single malts create escalated price structures? What caused the pricing that we're seeing now? Because I remember single malts used to be relatively cheap back 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's a good... again, I will take you back to 1979 when I joined the Glenlivet Distillers, and the then owners complained that one of the distributors in England was selling the Glenlivet under £20 a bottle. And I look at 1979, that's a long time ago. And I go around a supermarket and I will see some really excellent single malts for sale within the £20 to £30 bracket, which I still consider a bargain. My Balvenie was in the local cost cutter at under £30. 12-year-old double wood for David Stewart, great value. So there's still value out there. A lot of the aged products are very expensive, as we know, because it's stock issues, the stock. I remember one of the chief blenders saying we should always keep the production steady, because as we run as commercial things, the production would be dropped because we envisaged a credit crisis, and then the production would go up, but then there would be holes in inventory, which means that the continuity of aged product can be quite difficult at certain times. I remember in the 1980s when many of the distilleries would be increasing periods shut off, and of course that's why there's such holes in the inventory.
One of the distilleries that I had the chance to visit a few years ago with Ian Logan was Tormore, which was recently sold to Sukhinder Singh and his brother Rajbir at Elixir Distillers. That's one of the distilleries that was under your purview at Pernod Ricard, Chivas Brothers. What made Tormore so special besides the architecture?
Well, Tormore is so special because it was the first distillery built in Speyside since Glenelgan Distillery in the late Victorian era. We know the story that Doig looked at Glenelgan and said there won't be another distillery built for half a century, and he was more or less correct. Glenkeith opened in the same year, but that was in an old mill. But Tormore was in a greenfield site, and it was a massive. What was the word? It was a massive signature to the world that whiskey was back. We're building new distilleries. It was built by Shenley, a fascinating character, as you know. Louis Rosenstiel built this distillery. Everything about it is amazing. It's one of my favourite distilleries. I say that about all my distilleries because they're all favourites. But Tormore, because it was started when I was born, I would also like to say to folk, I always hear it's 1960. 1960 was the official opening, but it actually produced whiskey in 1959. The first cask was used in a blend of Long John for the American market. What a fantastic whiskey in a 21-year-old bottle when it was used. But fascinating. Great distillery. Sits within the Highland region now, but it used to be part of Murrayshire. It's on the other side of the River Spey. So anything west or east of the Spey, it's either Murrayshire or Bumpshire, but it's sat at the other side of the Spey.
What other distilleries are out there that make great single malts that we never get to try because they all go to blends?
Oh, Glentochers, Glenbargie, probably Sandy Hislop's one of his favourites. It's the basis of a lot of the Ballantine style brands. Glentochers was built for Buchanan's Black and White, superb whiskey. I've also been associated with. Look at Glenallachie now. It was hidden. Now you can see it. Glenkeith's a great favourite, simply because it was built as a triple distillation unit. It's been through so many changes, but makes superb single malts. But there's lots of others hidden within. I'm a great fan of Linkwood. I'm a great fan of Brackla. These sort of, play a great role within the industry, but they're superb whiskies.
Interesting question from Greg Serafian, who says it's good to see you again. If you had to run a non-Pernod Ricard distillery, even a closed one, a big opportunity here, which one would you like to run?
Well, that's simple. There's two: Glenmore in Inverness, and Glenlachie in Port William at the either end of the Caledonian Canal. Glenmore simply because it's my what would it be? My grandfather's uncle built the distillery, and Glenlachie because my mother's great uncle was manager of it. We've found out now that he only made whiskey for a few years, but he was in with Joseph Hobbs when it was bought over by Joseph Hobbs. He moved from Clydesdale to Glenlachie via Ballychan. It's now peated Edredour, and he was also at Clydesdale Distillery, but Cragganmore. Cragganmore, a great birthplace, a lot of distillers. So that's the two I would love to get in about. And I'd love to speak to the generations before me to see what they were doing and how they thought about things.
Who was your mentor as a distiller when you started out?
I've got a lot of mentors. One just died last year. It was Charlie Fraser, who was the brewer at Glenfarclas. Ronnie McDonald, he still works for the industry, still working for Boot Malt. He was the guy that gave me my first job at Glenfarclas. Douglas McDonald, Douglas Shank, lots of folk. And you always learn from Hugh Thompson at Glenkeith. Hugh used to speak about the acquisition of Strathisla and, well, the Milton, as he called it, which was Strathisla Distillery. He was there when Seagram took it over, but he had great stories and great experience. He learnt me not to swear because his vocabulary did not have a swear word, where a lot of the others had swear words, but he was a great character.
We have a question here from Mitch Gurwitz, and I'm not going to ask you to tackle this one. I'll take this one. When he heard that 700 ml imports would now be permitted in the U.S., he was hoping that some of these expressions that are only available in duty-free shops would hit our shores. Any chance of this happening? My guess is no, because they would have already done it, but also because travel retail is a completely different division in most companies. And the travel retail folks want something that isn't available at regular retail. So that's why those expressions are created for travel retail. Is that fair to say, Alan?
Yeah, that's right. And remember, there's been so much disruptions with COVID, etc., and the supply chains. So I can understand a lot of the problems just now. I'm so thankful to be enjoying the fruits of our labours, having a wee dram, because I'm not involved in it. But I know the problems it is just now. It's stock. I know I was speaking to Frank and the team at New Brunswick, getting the product into the places is a bit of a problem just now. But it's just a reflection of the times that we live in.
What are your plans for the next year besides Fredericton? Where do you want to go, and what do you want to travel and see and do with Eileen?
Oh, I'd love to go back and see the guys in New Zealand, because, as you know, I went out through New Zealand and Australia. It was moving at big speed because COVID was chasing everybody around the world. So I found New Zealand an interesting place. And I think you've covered it a number of times, Mark, in your podcast, how vibrant that New Zealand scene is. I think that's fascinating to see. Michael Fraser-Milne, a long-time friend. We went to the same school, but we maybe went at different times. But Michael, a great passion for single malt whiskies, and has done so much with New Zealand, and also his Dram Fest, such an important event. I'd love, unlike you, I'd love to revisit Japan. Alan Wolstenholme finally got translated back to English. Taketsura's notes in Scotland. Of course, his grandfather, Peter Margachinas, was the distiller at Hazelburn. So that was great to see. And also, we've finally got this year, you interviewed him just a few weeks ago, Leon at James Eady, got the reprinted of the 1920s distillery. Fascinating stuff. I hadn't seen so many of that photographs. Fascinating to see. And it shows you that what was happening in Scotland wasn't as, dare I say it, as far behind as we thought it was. But here's the guys that had taught the guys that were going to start the Japanese industry.
Here's a question from Tabitha that could start some controversy. You don't have to answer this one if you don't want to. Do you think there are too many limited edition whiskeys these days, and is it just a money grab by the producers? I don't think so. I think it's that they've found these whiskeys and they're trying to get them out to the consumers. And yes, there's profit involved. These guys aren't in it to, it's not a charity. but can you explain it from the distiller's end and from the company end?
Yeah, that's a, you probably covered it there, Mark, because I was always told that. I used to say, "Gosh, we've got some fantastic whiskies in inventory. We're produce." I speak of it we. I must use the past tense. But at Chivas Brothers, I went into Keithbone too, and they were disgorging whiskies, and it was for a very old Royal Salute. And I'm saying that's a fantastic whiskey, and that's a great whiskey. You know, we could make a fortune bottling it. And the chief blender said to me, he says, "Yes, Alan, you can have that, but if you can replace it with something of that age." So it's all about inventory, and it's also about, you know, what sort of brands you're promoting, etc., etc. Uh, I I can tell this story now. I remember going, and they were disgorging quite old whiskey into a 10-year-old product, and somebody says, "Oh, why are we doing that?" And says, "It's because we're keeping the momentum going." Remember that the inventory is like a wave. It's up 1 year, it's down 1 year. But you know, David Boyd was the chief blender at Campbell Distillers at the time, and he used to say to me, "That's the fill-in program for next year." And then he used to do that. He says it will be disrupted by so many things in the next year that it won't look near. And it's so true. Aged product came about because we had plenty of inventory. But then, of course, when we have plenty of inventory, we have to do smarter things with it as well.
Great question from Greg Serafi. And you've had a great career, a remarkable career. Will you write a book with your whiskey stories someday?
I've been asked about that book, but I think if everybody records my interviews over the year, I think that's the book, because I have tried, Mark, but I am not a journalist. I'm a distiller, and you know, I wrote a chapter, and my wife says, "My God, that'll be a great cure for insomniacs." So. Yeah, I've thought about that, but I think making whiskey or helping folk to make whiskey and helping to explain the history and that, I think that's my skill.
Alan, I want to thank you for jumping in and joining us at the
Thank you
last
very
minute.
much, Matt. Thank you, and sorry for jumping in.
Oh no, it's you salvaged the show. Thanks for jumping in, and we appreciate it. And we'll see you in Fredericton next month.
Yeah, that's fine. And that sounds a very interesting thing that you're planning on Sunday. So I'll be sending through my details.
All right. That's
thank you very much, Mark.
All the best, Alan. Thanks. And
cheers.
That's Alan Winchester, our pal from the Glenlivet, Chivas Brothers, Pernod Ricard fame, now in retirement and having a lot of fun. And this is, oh, geez, this does not bode well for Scotch, I think. Christopher Malloy says he was at a large shop in Manhattan's Upper West Side today and swore they probably only had about 15 bottles of Scotch on the shelves. It's a dying spirit in New York City. That's not a good sign, folks, if especially in New York City, where the liquor stores like Park Avenue and Astor Wines have literally hundreds of scotches. To find one that only has 15, that may be a neighborhood shop, though, so we'll see what happens with that one. We had a note that came through from our pal Chris Tatsenko. He and Lilith made it back down to. They were here just a couple of weeks ago, here in the studio, having drams with me, and all of their bottles made it back through. They took about 13 bottles back, and everything made it through customs okay. Good to hear. And as Dave Kuhn points out, perhaps, Christopher, somebody thirsty moved into the neighborhood. We can always hope. So everybody's saying thank you to Alan for joining us. We're going to call it at 45 minutes and 40 seconds. Thank you for joining us on the Ask Mark Anything with our special guest, Alan Winchester. Join us next week when Ashok Chuckalingam of Amrut will be with us, and we'll be talking about Indian whiskeys and Indian single malts. next week. And once again, if you're interested in joining the beta test for our little special program, send your email address to comments@whiskycast.com, and we will get back in touch with you. You'll need to be available for a Zoom call with your mobile phone available on Sunday night to talk to the boss. She's organizing this little project, and I think you're going to find it very interesting and very enjoyable. I hope you'll take part in it. And I hope you'll join us for the podcast on Monday morning and our live webcast again next Friday night with Ashok Chokalingam of Amrut. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone. Good night.